Hey, it's Danny from ProjectManaverse.com, and in this video I'm going to discuss 4 hidden costs on your IT project. So let's jump in. First of all, let me say that IT projects can be very expensive. They can range from hundreds of thousands of pounds to even millions of pounds. And as a project manager, it's really important that you try and get the costs correct up front at the start of the project so you can budget for them, ask for the money, get it all approved, and then your project should be smooth sailing in terms of just running it and having the money to pay for things as you go along. And when you get to your go live, you've hopefully pretty much used up all your budget, and you can say that you delivered on time to budget. That's what we all want. Now, unfortunately, on IT projects, there's sometimes some hidden costs that can catch people out, and you don't want to be in that position where you suddenly get a bill for something that you weren't prepared for, because that means that you have to go and ask for more money from your senior stakeholders, and that's never a fun conversation. You don't look good as a project manager, and often the money's just not available because there's so much going on, there's so many other things to pay for, other projects, etc., and the budgets are kind of carved out at the start of the year. So it's really important that you get it right from the start, and you don't have to be in this position where you're asking for more money. So let me jump into the 4 common most catch-outable IT costs that I've come across as my career as a project manager. So number 1 is license costs, and this is the biggest one. License costs are really tricky. So if you're doing some kind of IT project, usually software, a software upgrade or a new software application that you're building, there's probably going to be some kind of license costs there. It might be for the system itself as a whole, and usually for users that will use it, they'll need to have to pay a license cost as well. So you need to make sure you understand what they all are and budget for them as well. On a similar vein, if you've got a lot of data that you're using and you need to store it on a database, well, you will need to store it on a database. But if there's quite a lot of it, there's often cost to having the data on there, and the more data you put in that database, the costs can go up because you have to scale the database. Just make sure you fully understand all the costs, not just for setting up the project, but also like a year down the line, 2 years down the line. Think about how the infrastructure needs to scale to be able to support growing business or whatever your project is doing. And just make sure you do your due diligence and get everything in writing, especially with the license costs, because sometimes you can think you've covered all the costs and you can actually have some conversations and you think, I spoke to this guy from this company, he said there's no implications on this area, and then 6 months down the line it turns out that there is, and you've got nothing in writing. So make sure, if people say there are no implications when it comes to licenses, make sure you're getting that in writing as well. So that's hidden cost number 1. Number 2 is downstream impacts. So when you're building something or you're upgrading some architecture or software or infrastructure, we often just think myopically on the thing that we're looking at and we're upgrading, and we don't fully expand our scope to think about, right, what are all the impacts of what we're doing here? What are the downstream impacts? So if your application or your software is sending data downstream to downstream systems or getting data from upstream systems, is what you're doing going to impact that? Is the file format going to change that's going to all those downstream systems, or is the data transfer going to change? And if it is, are you as a project manager, or is your project responsible for managing those impacts? Do you have to change the downstream systems so they can now take this new thing that you're delivering? So you need to think about all these impacts, and if you need to, let's say, change a downstream system so it can now receive the file format that you've changed, you probably have to pay for that. So you make sure you clarify that at the start of the project when you're thinking about your scope. Are you responsible for all the downstream and upstream impacts, or are you not? Is it in scope or out of scope? And if they are in scope, make sure you engage them at the start of the project and get a quote for the work that they'll need to do, because it can sometimes be expensive if it's another department in an organization that have to run themselves and pay for change. So that's number 2. Number 3 is just testing in general. So testing resources. We often, when we think about project costs and we're budgeting at the start of the project, we think about the core team, the test manager, the BA, the architects, the engineers. But when it comes to the testing phase, especially user acceptance testing, when the end user needs to come along, they don't always do that for free. Sometimes they do if they're in the business, sometimes they don't. And sometimes they'll need to backfill their position in the business so they can dedicate themselves to the project, and that will cost money. Same comes to the downstream impacts, I talked about those downstream systems. If they're changing something, you're going to have to test that thoroughly when you build your thing and do the end-to-end test, and they'll probably be charging for that testing and their expertise and their time. So make sure you're budgeting for testing resources as well. Okay, the last one is hidden governance costs. Now, this is not usually a huge amount, but it can trip you up. So make sure you understand the governance processes fully at the start of the project, all the steps that you need to do to get through the governance, especially IT governance, things like security checks and database tests and database failovers and infrastructure checks and all that kind of stuff. Often you'll have a checklist of things that you need to do, criteria you need to meet, and often you can't figure that all out yourself. You need to speak to specialist consultants, and they'll happily do it for you. It may take them like a day or two of time to do an assessment, but then they'll turn around and give you a bill for that. And it's obviously not a huge amount, but it can mount up if you've got lots of governance to go through. So make sure you fully understand the governance, or just at least put aside some money to make sure you can pay for those consultants that will help you with the governance along the way. Okay, that's the video. I'll do a quick recap because we've got time. So number one was the license costs. Make sure you fully understand any license costs. This is a big one. Just do your due diligence, get it all in writing. Number two is the downstream impacts. If any downstream systems are going to be impacted and they're going to need to change and do technical changes, are you going to have to pay for that? And if so, get it in your budget. Number three are the testing resources. Are there any business resources that will be testing on your project that will need to be backfilled? Or are those downstream systems going to test for you? And what's the bill for that? And the last one was the hidden governance costs. So any consultants that will need to help you get through your governance and navigate that governance, make sure you've got a bit of budget to pay for those. Now, ideally, you want to have some contingency budget in your budget as well, but often you can't always have that. They don't allow a contingency budget. They want you to be precise, but there's always ways to kind of sneak some in there if you need to. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit the like button. It will help the channel, and subscribe for more videos like this one. Until tomorrow, please take care.